Hey there, Possum Rob here. As I record this, there are 818 subscribers to the channel. You guys are the mighty 800. I love all of yous. Thank you so much for going, yeah, okay, a possum's gonna talk to me about Star Trek or whatever. I'm gonna ride that train and see where it goes. You are my people, and if I'm having a cookout, you guys are already invited. Outstanding. So this is episode 9, and we've done some reaction videos too, so there's more than that really. But there've been a lot of comments from yous, and I wanted to take some time to answer some of them, or address whatever they might have been talking about or whatever. So strap in, because the possum's reading his mail. Hey! This first batch comes from the video, The Top 4 Times Kirk Used Words to Blow Up a Computer. Linked up there if you ain't seen it yet. This first one is from White Wolf, who says, I always believed that Kirk could talk the entire Borg collective into self-destruct if he ever met them. That, or seduce the Borg Queen into destroying the collective and herself. Yeah, I'm surprised there hasn't been a fan film made of the Borg invading the Federation in Kirk's time and him bringing the logic food down on them. Basically doing what that computer virus Data created was going to do when they loaded Hugh up with it. Only just from saying stuff. I think it would go something like this.
We are the Borg. We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own. Your culture will adapt to service us. Resistance is futile.
Your own directive to seek out distinctiveness is illogical, because through assimilation, distinctiveness is destroyed. Once you've assimilated the entire galaxy, the entire universe, your progress will come to an end. You will have ensured your own obsolescence. I put it to you that resistance isn't futile. Assimilation is futile. Error. Yeah, something like that. John, just John, writes, another honorable mention, A Taste of Armageddon. Kirk destroys the war simulation computer. That's true, he does, but he uses a phaser to blow it up, so not exactly talking it to death. But, you know, on second thought, I guess the honorable mention list was for things that were almost on the list, except for some minor details, so yeah, I guess that does kind of work. It was central to the plot, it was Kirk facing off with the computer, but he took it in a kind of Indiana Jones direction, and instead of talking it into suicide, he just shot it in the face. So I'm agree with that. Should have been on the honorable mention list. KC4CVH, which I don't think I'm supposed to be able to pronounce, says, fabulous. Now let's look at the many times Captain Kirk, space explorer, wound up deep underground. You know, I mentioned this in my reply to this comment, but I wanted to talk about it here too. I had never thought of that before. How many episodes were there where they ended up way underground? Just off the top of my head, there's What a Little Girl's Made Of, Devil in the Dark, Spock's Brain, For the World is Hollow, yada yada yada, parts of the Cloud Minders, and I'm sure there's others I'm not thinking of too. Like Mud, that was underground, right? It is kind of weird how many times the crew ends up in some subterranean complex. And hey, let's not forget, it happens in Star Trek 2 as well with the Genesis Cave. What a weird trope. We may need to do a show about that at some point. Alright, Kai Proton asks, wasn't there a Star Trek animated where the ship's computer was brought to life, wrote Kirk is a jerk on his back, and they had to do some fancy pants stuff to sort it out? Yeah, there was, Kai. It was called The Practical Joker. And it wasn't the best the animated series had to offer. The Enterprise travels through a sparkly nebula to hide from some Romulans that are attacking them, and the energy from the nebula basically turns the Enterprise computer into a sentient being who loves playing pranks on the crew. You know, that'll happen. Gotta watch out for them nebulas. In addition to the special uniform you mentioned that it replicated for Kirk with "Kirk is a jerk" written on the back, it also does the old shoe polish on Spock's scanner eyepiece gag, and some other annoying crap too. Kirk tricks the computer into taking the ship back through the energy field again, which, by an extreme stroke of luck, reverses what happened to the computer, because my money would have been on making the computer twice as annoying, with the punchline being that this time the Romulans chased them through that nebula, and they got the wacky joke of computers themselves. Not a great episode, but interesting fact, it does have the first appearance of the holodeck, which, of course, immediately malfunctions, inadvertently beginning a rather dubious Star Trek tradition. Whether or not that's a good thing, well, I'll leave that up to you. And finally, BJ King says, after seeing this, I'd guess you couldn't let Kirk anywhere near Adele. The computer or the singer, I would think. But yeah, this made me think of another fun fan film idea of a young Kirk in school doing work on a computer, and every now and then he'd accidentally blow it up by talking to it. And his parents would be like, "Again? That's the third one this semester." I think that would be funny. Alright, moving on. These next comments are from the video, The Worst Commodores and Bureaucrats in Star Trek the Original Series. Link up there if you ain't seen it. Michael Curtis says, "You forgot Admiral Nechayev, not sure about the spelling." Actually, you nailed it. She appeared in several episodes of TNG and at least once in DS9 that I can recall. She wasn't necessarily incompetent or anything, but she definitely falls into the jerk category. Yeah, I got a lot of comments pointing out Nechayev and saying she needed to be in the honorable mentions. I originally went back and forth on her because, like you said, she wasn't evil or incompetent or anything. She was just doing her job, but she was a pretty sizable jerk about it. But the more I thought about it after I put the episode up, that's really all High Commissioner Ferris was guilty of too, so yeah, I think she did actually deserve to be on the list. But to be fair, Ferris did have the flappy jacket, so I maintain he deserved it more. But, point well taken. Space Kissing Her, very clever, says, "This style of video really goes well with the Possum being pure of heart, dumb of ass." Moving on. David Sergeant says, "Excellent. I would have loved to hear your take on the jerk from The Trouble with Tribbles." Yeah, Niles Barris you're talking about there. Got a couple of calls for Barris in the comments. I did consider putting him on the list, but as annoying as he is, he's really not in a lot of the episode. Between Cyrano Totally Not Harry Mudd Jones and Commander Koloth, he's kind of pushed to the sidelines for most of the episode. If I didn't use the honorable mentions for people from other Star Trek shows, that's probably where I would have put him. I mean, you're right, definitely a jerky and really kind of fussy bureaucrat, but there's not enough of him in the story to do a section of the video on. But yeah, valid point. Schwatvogel writes, I'd exclude Decker, as he was clearly not himself during the events of Doomsday Machine. The impression I had of him watching this episode was that before he lost his entire crew and blamed himself for it, before his ship was shot to hell, he was a responsible, experienced, and intelligent officer. I can't exactly blame him for not being able to think straight after he was essentially broken as a character, a human, and a captain. Hell, imagine Kirk in that exact same position. Other than that, yeah, sounds about right. Yeah, I got a lot of people pushing back on my decision to include Decker on the list. And for the record, I stand by my decision. If you go back and watch the episode again, which you probably should, let's be honest. In fact, you should watch all of them again, just to be sure. But anyway, if you go back, you'll see that I have nothing but sympathy for Decker, right up and until he commandeers the Enterprise and puts 430 people's lives in danger trying to do the same thing that got the last 430 killed, and ignoring the advice from the best science officer in Starfleet at the same time. That was the point where he made the list. If you're traumatized, I got nothing but sympathy for you. But that trauma don't give you a pass when you go full Ahab and try to take everyone around you down with you. That gets you a spot on the Dingleberry bench right next to High Commissioner Flappy Jacket. Gary Major says, I can agree with you a little about Kirk in Star Trek the Motion Picture being jerky, but he was not jerky about getting command in Wrath of Khan. Yeah, I thought I'd get some comments on that. I wasn't really clear enough, I guess. I wasn't saying he was literally a jerk about the circumstances of assuming command in Star Trek 2. In fact, it feels like Nick Meyer looked at the motion picture and specifically wanted to kind of rewrite Kirk's jackassness in that movie with the way he almost insists that the ship is Spock's in The Wrath of Khan. I've always just found that comment about, I guess I'm going to have to ask you to grow up a little sooner than you expected, to be a little, I don't know, a little jerky. And I'm well aware that may just be me. Maybe it's how he says it, I don't know. But no, he's definitely not a jerk about actually assuming command of the Enterprise. Well, not in 2. He is definitely a jerk about it in a motion picture. He Maccabee says, "You're letting Commodore Wesley from Ultimate Computer off the hook?" Now, I gotta stand up for my boy Bob Wesley on this one. He was doing what he had to do with the information he had at the time. Now, we can talk about how he lost a 4-against-1 engagement, but it was a surprise attack, and the M5 was supposed to be pretty darn good with that kind of thing. So I'm not gonna hold that against old Bobby Dubs there. One thing I will grant you, though, is the Captain Dunsel crack was a pretty low blow. I like to think that he wasn't meaning it that way. He was probably happy about not having people in harm's way, and maybe he thought Kirk would find it funny. But we're also given to understand that Kirk and Wesley have known each other for a while, and Kevin Riley could have told you that wasn't going to go over so well with the captain. But that's just one black spot on the record of, honestly, in my opinion, one of the only exceptions to the Commodore's suck rule. Quick shout out to Commodores Stone and Mendez as well there. Finally, Dan Berkey says, "Klingons blow them up in the neutral zone? Huh, no, Romulans. Weird statement at 4 minutes." I think there might be a misunderstanding there. In the episode The Deadly Years, you're right, it's Romulans blowing you up. Cadet Skippy, though, is talking about the Kobayashi Maru test, which is Klingons. Point is, from the beginning, Commodore Staka was well aware at how well just barging into the neutral zone by yourself typically goes. It's used at Starfleet Academy to create a literal no-win scenario and see how well the cadet in charge handles violently dying along with the rest of their crew. No wonder he wasn't on the command track. Or maybe he was, and his performance on the Kobayashi Maru got him booted out. Like he stumbled into the neutral zone even before he got the distress call or something. Who knows with that guy? Okay, these last few comments are from my What the Heck is Babylon 5 video. Link up there if you ain't seen it. Incidentally, I got ideas about some more What the Heck Is videos, which are going to be about shows or movies that I think more people ought to know about. Some of them will seem common and obvious if you've been around as long as I have, but some of these younger types, they don't know. Got a lot of positive response on this one. I am among my people. But wanted to touch on a couple of these comments, so here we go. Cabbage Plays says, among other things, Star Trek is all fantasy. I mean, how do you go from an economy based on personal wealth to no money? It really doesn't make sense in my head, hence the fantasy. I don't know. I think in a universe where you've invented the replicator and the matter-antimatter reactor, you've kind of got a situation where scarcity ain't really a thing anymore. I can see that in that era of effectively unlimited energy and resources, personal wealth might stop being a pursuit. That's never really bothered me. Probably isn't 200-300 years away, maybe more like 1500, but yeah, I can see it happening given the technological circumstances depicted in Star Trek The Next Generation. Now, what I do think happened from a narrative perspective was the creatives over at Star Trek realized that stories that take place in a utopia tend to be kind of boring. You can have the conflict from without thing carry you for only so long before you start wanting the heroes to have weaknesses, because weaknesses are interesting. That's why Superman stories are never really about Superman, right? He's invulnerable and all-powerful. That's boring, because he's never in any danger. So they have to give him external weaknesses like family and loved ones like Lois Lane, and or focus the story on the villain and get the interestingness from them. I think that's why Latinum was introduced to Deep Space Nine. And you're really seeing even Starfleet people talking about money and having even Starfleet act in morally questionable ways in these new shows. Weaknesses are interesting. So with that in mind, I do agree with you that Babylon 5 portrayed the future of humanity in a much more realistic and believable way. And honestly, the point of at least most science fiction is to hold a mirror up to present-day humanity. And that's a lot easier to do if the future humans are more relatable to the present humans. Possums don't gotta worry about that stuff, though. Moving on. Dwayne Oldson says, best sci-fi show ever. Even the way JMS adapted to missteps and unexpected catastrophes was masterful. If you don't know, JMS is short for J. Michael Straczynski, the creator, showrunner, and writer of the bulk of the Babylon 5 series. Yeah, one of the things I love about Babylon 5 is that JMS had a beginning, a middle, and an end in mind before he even started the series. He knew what the last shot of the series was going to be before the first shot was even officially storyboarded. That's the main reason that show gets the love that it gets. The show knew where it was going the entire time. But to your point, there were hiccups and problems along the way, and JMS knew that would be an issue, so he famously had an out for every single major character in the event someone had to bail out. And that happened with Michael O'Hare, it happened with Andrea Thompson, and it happened with Claudia Christian. Thankfully, never due to real tragedy, although O'Hare's exit was over mental health reasons that would eventually lead to an untimely death. But JMS had plans for that kind of thing, and that's brilliant. Now, at one point, it looked like they weren't going to get a 5th season, so JMS had to speed up the timeline so they could finish the story in 4. And then, after he made those adjustments, it turned out they did get a 5th season through TNT. That's a whole different can of worms there. But that was a bit unexpected. It wasn't the way he wanted things to go, and it gave rise to a pretty weak storyline in Season 5, the whole telepath war thing, to fill in those gaps. But all in all, it was pretty successful considering. Ben Wilson, who I thought was a possum there for a second, says, to give Babylon 5 a chance, you need to watch until the end of Season 2. Yeah, I do agree with that, but I also get that in the time of 6 to 10 episode seasons from shows with a ton of money to play with, so they kill it from the beginning, and like half of them have Pedro Pascal in them, telling someone to give a show 44 episodes to really get going is a heck of an ask. That's why, while I hope they come back and be more thorough with a rewatch, I do advocate skipping episodes the first time through. And it's part of the reason I did this video in the first place, to kind of set the scene and give a little reassurance that it's worth it if you stick it out. But yeah, if you're not on board by the time Sheridan apologizes, then the show's just not your thing, I guess. And that's fine. And finally, 96 FPS from Mars says, the description that starts at 1 minute in wouldn't have to be changed very much to also apply to SG-1. Not in neutral territory in any way, but it has a big swirly blue thing, ancient aliens, high stakes determining fate of the galaxy, etc., etc. You know, you're right. And they also get a ship a couple of seasons in, too. It's not as advanced as the White Star / Defiant, but it fits. Never thought of that. I like SG-1 a lot. Atlantis, too. Universe was a little broody for me. It's like Battlestar Galactica reboot threw up all over everything. Took me a while to get around to giving SG-1 a chance, but it's a favorite now. May do a video on it at some point. But 10 seasons is a lot to pull from, right? We'll see. So this has been Possum Rob reading your comments back to you. Come back later and we'll watch stuff. You'll love it. And let me take this opportunity to thank all of yous. Well, most of yous who commented on the videos. I loved seeing everybody's feedback, and it means a lot to me that you took the time to give me a shout. I don't always have time to respond to them, but I read every one of them, and it means the world. If you like the insight you got into your possum through this little forum here, reach down there and like that thumbs up button if you don't mind. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, let me ask you to hit that button too. Still got lots on the drawing board and in the pipeline coming soon, so you don't want to miss that. Picard reactions are still coming out. They'll be late by about 3 days or so because of copyright jail, but keep an eye out, they'll be there. And until next time, remember, possum friends are awesome friends. Take it easy, alright? Later.